All right, so I'll just start out. I get the pleasure of introducing some of our staff from around the state who are helping us give this presentation. We're going to split it up between the 5 of us, so you don't have to listen to any of us talk for too awful long. So tonight you'll hear from Mandy Watson, who's a biologist in our central office who oversees our fur bear and small game mammals program. Tim Watson is a Region 5 biologist who works with fur bears and upland game birds and is an avid upland game bird hunter, both of them, as you can see from the photos there. Evan Wills is a wildlife biologist and Reynolds Game Farm manager for us out near Ithaca. And then we have Mike Muthersbaugh, who's a wildlife biologist here in central office that oversees our upland game bird program. And lastly, I have me, my name's Josh Stiller. I am the small game unit leader here in central office. So I kind of help oversee our small game programs, so everything from fur bears to waterfowl. So you have a good crew of folks who can answer a lot of questions you may have about how we manage wildlife, or questions about just general questions about wildlife. It doesn't have to be about hunting, doesn't have to be about trapping, could just be about wildlife of New York and their life history. So feel free to take advantage of that opportunity and ask us all the questions you want. All right, so I'm going to kick us off and just talk about some of the surveys we do and that you all help us complete, and also some of the citizen science opportunities that there are. So I'm sure most of you who are online have seen this landing page before. This is our licensing page. If you've been hunting for a while, you may remember, I think it was 2006, 2008, something like that. We changed our licensing structure, or through the legislature it was changed. So we no longer have a small game, big game, and kind of this a la carte menu. So when you buy a hunting license, you just have a hunting license for small game in particular, but it's small and big game. So what that does is it creates some opportunities or challenges that we need to overcome, because obviously as an agency, part of our responsibility and our mission is to make sure all species are managed well. So we have to survey folks and try to figure out how many small game hunters we have, how much they participate, how many animals they harvest. That is all that's in front of us. And the only way we can do that is if we know how to reach you. So this is kind of my plug right here at the beginning, before we even get to like the surveys, why we survey, and citizen science stuff that we do, is please, 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 when you are purchasing your license, and you want to get surveys, you want to be able to provide input to us, because most of our decisions are done through structured surveys and hearing directly from hunters like yourselves, or general wildlife enthusiasts. So when you purchase a hunting license, it has your email address. This is the first screen that comes up. It confirms all of your information, your phone number, your email address, and that is the way that we reach out to you. So let's see. So there's a lot of reasons that we reach out to you. We're not just reaching out for the sake of it. We're doing it for a reason. We're trying to do one of 3 things. You know, in some cases, we're doing surveys like we just recently did on the left there, which is a survey about hunter opinions and values. In other cases, we're doing focus groups, which have a very different purpose. The nice thing about focus groups is we can interact with people and maybe get an explanation for why they answered a certain question a certain way. So both of these we do with both hunters, fishermen, and just the general public. It's not just hunters that we survey, but for hunters, that licensing information is super important. And then annually, you might get these. You might see these quite often. These are probably the ones that you're most likely to get, is for small game, for turkey hunting, and likely for some other species in the future. We're going to be surveying over 50,000 people at least once a year, trying to understand their hunting activities, how often they're going out, how many animals they harvest, all those things. So those are kind of the 3 main ways and main reasons why we survey the public, and they all have their kind of different strengths and weaknesses and reasons why we do it. But really, these are all your opportunity to provide us feedback, and it really helps us properly manage these wildlife species. So we really can't thank you all enough when you do participate in these surveys, and it gives you that opportunity to be heard on some of these opinion surveys. So something that's on us that I guess just full acknowledgement we're trying to do better at, something that I think we've been lacking at in some aspects, is providing you feedback. So you take the time out of your day to fill out one of these surveys, and be honest, in some cases, I feel like we haven't gotten back to our constituents as much as we should. So what we've started to do, and if you've done any of these recent online surveys for ones where we're able to analyze the data in a relatively short period of time, we can send you some feedback right away. So we sent this out. If you participated in the small game hunter survey, you got this email there on the left and the graphic that's on the right. So I'll just take 2 seconds because this is not only does it show you how we're using the data, explains how we're trying to provide feedback, but also just gives you an idea of how many hunters we have, how many of the different species they're hunting. So, you know, we have about 500 to 550,000 licensed hunters, including lifetime licensed hunters. We survey about 50,000, so 47,000, and about 22.9% respond to the survey, which is pretty good for online surveys. That's actually a pretty good response rate. A lot of these probably get bounced or put into spam folders, so definitely check those if you're interested in participating. And so overall in New York State, we have a little bit over 100,000 small game hunters. So about 20%, 18 to 20% of our licensed hunters are active small game hunters. And the key word there is active, because a lot of people may have a license and have the interest, but maybe they only hunt 1 out of every 3 years for small game, and they're a deer hunter normally, or something like that. So, and then rabbit, squirrel, hare, raccoon hunters, we have about 50,000, followed by upland game bird hunters, about 40,000. Coyote, fox, and bobcat hunters, about 21,000. And believe it or not, through this survey is also how we understand how many active frog and turtle hunters, which, as you can see there, it's a very small number, about 1,000. So those are all of our structured surveys, but there's a ton of other opportunities for whether you're a hunter trapper or just someone who's interested in the wildlife, for you to participate in wildlife management and provide data that helps us better manage wildlife. You know, there's only so many biologists, only so many technicians who are out there collecting data. So what we've learned is, especially as technology has evolved, is there's a lot of opportunity for the public to really help us better understand what's going on with turkeys. So I'm just going to highlight a couple of these that others that are going to present later are going to be emphasizing and providing a lot more information. But for woodcock and grouse, we have 2 surveys each year. We have a woodcock hunting log, so you go out, count how many birds you flush, how many hours you were out there. Helps us understand what flush rates are, which is an index of the population. The drumming survey, again, hear how many grouse are drumming in the springtime. It's another great opportunity for turkey hunters to help inform grouse management. Fur bearer sighting survey, that's just a general opportunity for anybody to help out. You know, you're driving around and you see a fisher. That's all valuable data for us, so it'd be great if you can report those. And it's a really quick, painless survey. And Mandy's going to be talking about that next. But and we have a summer poult survey that's super important to our understanding of productivity, because it's pretty variable from year to year. So the sightings of people as they drive around the state is really helpful. And lastly, we're not going to talk about this a lot tonight. I think Mandy talks a little bit about it, but if you're interested in learning more about this, I invite you to tune into our Monday webinar, where we'll have a dedicated presentation to Snapshot New York and really explain the details of how we're going to expand this. But this is using trail camera information to better understand abundance of wildlife around New York State. So with that, those are kind of the ways for you to be involved and active in wildlife management, again, whether you're a hunter or not. And with that, I will pass it off to Mandy to take it from here.
All right. Can everybody hear me okay? Hopefully this is fine.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, so my name is Mandy Watson, as Josh mentioned. So I am a fur bearer and small game mammal biologist in our central office in Albany. And I'm going to be talking a little bit about some of our small game mammals. So that would be, rabbits, hares, squirrels, some of those, and then also focus a lot on some of this community science. So these different ways that we're getting information. As Josh already mentioned, our agency overall really does rely on you, the public, to help us with some of our management of our wildlife species. It's difficult to cover large areas. It's difficult to get large sample sizes. So this information is really critical for us, and I'm going to be talking about that. All right, so first off, I'm going to start talking about, the value of our hunters and trappers. So we rely very heavily on our hunters and trappers to help us with wildlife management. As if you guys are hunters and trappers, I'm sure that you know this. You've probably received one of our many surveys that we send out that Josh talked about a little bit. So we often call on you all to help us kind of better understand, provide additional information to help us better understand some of our wildlife populations. So just kind of touching on some of this that we've done in the past is we have asked rabbit hunters who are hunting in specific counties that tend to be in the southeastern part of the state in our regions 3 and 4. To actually submit the heads of any harvested rabbits, and then we will test those to see whether they are New England cottontails, which are a native and threatened species, or Eastern cottontails, which are a much more common species that are found throughout the state. And that's really helped us kind of get a really good handle on where New England cottontails are in the state, which has been very helpful for our staff as we move forward, kind of doing some habitat management and whatnot to try to help this population out. Some other examples as well from the fur bearer side of things, we frequently will ask hunters and trappers to turn in teeth of any harvested animals. And what we do with that is we actually send it off to get tested. So there's a couple of different labs throughout the country that are able to test the teeth to see the age of the animal. So we can really get an idea of what the age structure of our animals are, which is very, very helpful. We did that for bobcat about 10 years or so ago now, which helped us have a better understanding of that population. We can go out and we can trap bobcats, but we're never going to get close to the number of bobcats that are harvested. So it's really more representative, tells us what's going on there. And one really interesting project that we have that's currently going on is this regional gray fox and fisher health study. So we have actually asked trappers and hunters who harvest gray foxes and fisher to submit the carcasses of the animals to our biologists, and then we're sending them off to veterinary pathologists to actually do full necropsies on them, to do a bunch of testing, to try to get a really full picture of the health of these species. And some of the reasons why the focus is on these species is because gray foxes have shown what seems to be a regional decline in certain areas. So in New York, they seem to be doing okay, but there's certain areas where it seems like their population has declined. In other areas like the Midwest, it really seems like they've experienced a potentially significant population decline. So we're focused on them to try to get a real good look at kind of our gray foxes and what threats they may be facing from a health perspective. And fishers as well, mostly because we actually collected carcasses from trappers several years ago, and we found that that fishers tended to have pretty high rates of what's known as anticoagulant rodenticide. So it's this kind of rodenticide that they were ingesting, likely through ingesting small mammals that had directly eaten the rodenticide. And it can cause some pretty severe health impacts to wildlife. We're still kind of working on understanding the real health risk better, but essentially it can lead to some pretty significant bleeding. It's anticoagulant, so it makes it so that they have trouble clotting, and then they're more susceptible to potentially bleeding to death. So we picked these two species, and we actually just got some preliminary results, which was kind of exciting. So far, 100% of the fisher that we submitted, that New York submitted, which was about 11 animals, or sorry, 20 fisher and then 11 gray foxes. So for the fisher, 100% of those and 2/3 of the gray foxes have been exposed to anticoagulant rodenticides. And really interestingly as well, we found that gray foxes seem to be exposed to a fairly large number of heavy metals, such as lead. So about 75% of gray foxes across the Northeast actually have some levels of lead, cadmium, and arsenic. So those heavy metals. So like I said, we're still trying to figure out what exactly this may mean, but it is, just kind of interesting seeing that this wildlife is exposed to some of these threats that we may not have thought that much of. All right. So another part of this study was looking at canine parvovirus as well as distemper, but the parvovirus is really interesting to me. So parvovirus, if anyone has a dog, you likely have heard of parvovirus. Most dogs are vaccinated for it, and it can be deadly in dogs, especially for puppies and young dogs. And so out of the fisher and gray foxes that were tested, we found that a pretty high number, so 4 out of 10 total gray foxes and 9 out of 19 total fisher, so close to 40 to 50%, were actually positive for canine parvovirus. And these are from animals that were primarily hunter and trapper submitted. So these are presumably healthy animals, at least behaving in a healthy manner, not sick animals that are then being tested, that are coming back as positive for canine parvovirus. And this is, I think it is pretty interesting just from a human health and safety note that this is happening, and because of the possibility for transmission to dogs, it is just something to be aware of. If you do hunt foxes, hunt fur bearers, or if you trap, being aware that this is a disease that seems to be out on the landscape in our wildlife, and then taking precautions to make sure that your dogs aren't coming into contact with any carcasses that you have, and also disinfecting areas where you may process any fur bearers, and also just getting your dogs vaccinated are all really, really important here to protect your dogs. So we are still collecting additional gray foxes for this research. We have enough fisher samples, but they are looking for more gray foxes. So if you hunt gray foxes and are interested in submitting samples to the study, you can reach out directly to us. So we're interested in taking whatever you may have. You can reach out to your regional wildlife office. Otherwise, email wildlife@dec.ny.gov, or you can call the phone number on the screen there, and we can arrange some kind of pickup for this. So that's just, one example of some community science that we are currently involved with that is really interesting. It's ongoing. It's some cool research. As for other folks, so if you don't hunt or trap, don't worry, we have plenty of opportunities for you to still help out with stuff. So Josh mentioned earlier our fur bearer sighting survey. So this is an online survey. You can find it on our website. You can scan that QR code on the slide there. Or you can just go on our website and then search for bear sighting survey and it will bring you there. And this is essentially this form where we're asking folks to submit any sightings of fur bearers that you see. Fur bearers and some of our rare small game mammals, or not necessarily rare, but those that are not seen as often. So I see that somebody asked about if there's interest in roadkill reports, and this is where we definitely have interest in roadkill reports. So it can be roadkill that you see. It can be trail camera pictures. It can be just a sighting. We get a lot of videos from ring and blink cameras as well. And you can upload those photos to the survey, and that just kind of helps us really look and confirm the sightings and whatnot. And this data is actually really, really useful for us. So, it helps us better understand where this wildlife is found throughout the state. So a lot of these species like weasels, and as well as our fisher and bobcats, they're not seen very often. We know that they're around and they can be found throughout the state, but we just don't see them. So this is a really good way for us to learn a little bit more about them, figure out what habitats they're using, anything with their behavior. It does really help us too, because most of our projects that DEC does tends to be focused on public land, on more remote areas. And this gives us really important information from those urban and suburban areas where we know that there's wildlife using these areas, but we just don't always sample it. So this is super, super helpful for that. And I will just note, we don't ever share any information. We don't share locations with the public. We sometimes get some concerns there. But we are looking for this, and we do use this data. So in general, we're not necessarily looking for sightings of everything, but we're looking for some of our more elusive species. So that does include some of our fur bearers like bobcats, fishers, gray foxes, martins, river otters, and weasels. And then we're looking for some of our species that we really don't understand that well, such as fox squirrels and snowshoe hares as well. So if you guys ever have any sightings of fox squirrels or snowshoe hares, we definitely want to hear about it, and we would love for you to report to this survey. In New York City and Long Island, those are some areas that we're interested in, a few more different species. So we're also interested in learning about any sightings of beaver, mink, coyotes, and skunks as well, just to get a better idea of kind of where they are found. And I'm just going to kind of show you really quickly here, as long as this worked. Some information. So it's going to be a broad scale. So, you can't necessarily see exactly where they are, but this is our fur bearer sighting database. You can see we have gotten over 1.4 thousand sightings. And this just went live about a year ago. So this has been about a year. We've gotten over 1,000 sightings, which is really, really exciting. And we can look at it. And one of the things I just wanted to show folks was snowshoe hare. You can see that we can also sort, like I said, you can include photos. So if we look at all of our snowshoe hare sightings, we really haven't gotten that many. So like I said, we're very interested in that. And then as well, our fox squirrels here, we have gotten just one report. And we can see some details on this fox squirrel. This was actually a roadkill animal. It was actually submitted by Tim, who is on this call. He's a DEC biologist. So we're definitely very interested in fox squirrels. But you can see it's just kind of, this gives us really good information. Like I said, DEC staff can look at this and we can see some details. We can look at trail camera pictures to see, yes, that is a gray fox, and we can confirm that. And so this is very, very useful for us. And I would very much encourage folks to report their sightings. And I do see that there's a question about carcasses, roadkill carcasses. So right now, we would be interested in fresh carcasses for gray foxes to take some of those samples that for that gray fox study that I mentioned. They do have to be relatively fresh so that we can do all of the disease sampling and whatnot. But if you do see some, I would recommend, rather than reporting it to the public sighting survey, giving us a call. So calling either your regional office, likely your regional office is the best bet. And then we can kind of get out there to collect those samples. And at any other time, we would just kind of recommend, if it's an older carcass, doesn't seem like it's super fresh, still report it on our fur bearer sighting survey, but we won't be taking samples. So thank you very much for offering or for asking that question. All right. So moving on from that, Josh also mentioned this project, Snapshot New York. So this is a new project. It just launched in June of this year. It's a collaborative project between DEC and Cornell University that's really looking at using a trail camera network to monitor wildlife across New York. And there's a couple of different components of this. So we do have a DEC component where DEC staff are going out and setting up trail cameras. But then there's also a public component, so a citizen science component, where we have the public volunteering to put out trail cameras and then send those photos to us, and then we can get an idea of what species we have, where they are throughout the state. We can use that information to better guide our management, so we can use it for, you know, our big game. So bear and deer are some of our high priority species, so that we can use that to set any, you know, tag allocations, adjust the season structure as needed, anything like that. And we're also very interested, so some of our other target species as well are bobcats, fishers, some of those more rare species that we're just working on better understanding where they are throughout the state, such as gray foxes and weasels, and then also turkeys as well. So not only can we tell whether these species are in an area, which is helpful, but, you know, we can get some additional information as well. So we can get some information on reproduction. So looking at does and fawns, looking at turkeys, the hens to poult ratios. We can get a lot of really cool information from this camera project. So our goal is to kind of monitor these trends of these species over time, and then help guide management and give us a lot of really good information so that we can better manage these species. And like the fur bearer sighting survey, one of the real big draws of a project like this is that it does help us sample these areas that are difficult for DEC to get to. So over 60% of New York is made up of private land, and it's hard for us to sample private land. So having folks go out there, a lot of folks are already setting out trail cameras, and you can just use your own trail camera, set it out, and then just share some images with us, you know, and then help us with wildlife management. It's a really good way to get engaged, and to really play a role in this work, which I think is pretty neat. So like I mentioned, this just launched this June, and we have gotten some really, really good results. So basically the state of New York is divided into a bunch of grid cells, and then folks can reserve a grid cell and put out a camera. And we've gotten over 800 members of the public who have reserved these grid cells to put cameras out. So in this map on this slide here, you can see that there is these blue dots, so that those are members of the public or citizen scientists who have put out cameras. And then the red ones are actually DEC cameras, so we're working on kind of the smaller scale. But we've gotten really, really good participation, which is awesome. You know, if this is something you may be interested in, I highly encourage you to check out the website. So that's snapshotny.org. And you can get some more information on this project. All that you really need is the ability to set out a camera. So we do have a limited number of cameras that are available for a loan. At this time, they've all been loaned out, so we're mostly relying on folks who have their own camera. But you can go on a wait list if you don't have a camera of your own. And then, you upload the photos to the website once you get an account. So it's overall pretty easy. We're definitely, if you have any questions on this, I'd be happy to answer them. You can drop your questions in that Q&A box, and we'll answer them as they come in. But if this is something that you think you may be interested in, I definitely highly recommend it. As you can see from our map, we've got some pretty good coverage, but we're always looking for more folks to become involved, especially if you happen to live in the northern part of New York, also Long Island as well. So if you live in any of those areas, we definitely highly encourage you. Right. And I believe that is all that I have. So I am going to turn this over to Tim Watson, and he's going to talk a little bit about grouse and woodcock. So thanks, everyone.
All right, thanks everyone. Like Mandy mentioned, my name is Tim Watson, and I am one of our regional biologists in our Region 5 Warrensburg office, and among other things, I cover our upland game birds. I'm going to give you a brief update on status and trends of both our ruffed grouse and woodcock in New York, some information on habitat management and how hunters can get involved in some of our surveys, logs, and data collection, so we can help better manage our grouse and woodcock species. Our first slide here, just showing some grouse flushing rates. This is also just what we know as birds flush per hour. This is from our past year's data. This data is all collected from our grouse and woodcock hunting log. You can see stronger numbers of grouse in the Adirondacks, Tug Hill, and Catskills, west over to the East Appalachian Plateau. This generally coincides with our longer term flush rates from our log data, but it's among some of our lower observed data sets over the last 15 years. These declines are likely related to declining habitat quantity and quality on a landscape scale. That's limiting grouse in survival and productivity. Really in like the 1960s through the 80s, grouse were at their height. This coincides with large-scale farm abandonment across the state, leading to large amounts of prime grouse habitat. But over the decades, this habitat has continued to mature without proper management. It's not really as suitable for grouse anymore. During the 2024 to 2025 hunting season, we had approximately 144 hunters that participated in the hunting log. They recorded over 1,200 hunting trips, just shy of 3,000 hours of field, and over 200 grouse flushed. Here you'll see our flushing rates. This is over the last 20 years, also from our hunting log data. The graph on the right shows the statewide flush rates over that same time. This shows a slight downward trend from about one bird per hour in the early 2000s to one bird every 2 hours over the last few years. Again, the main reason for this trend is likely habitat based. I'll talk a little bit more later on about some programs looking to create more grouse habitat across the state, but also, but the DEC is also looking at potential declines related to West Nile virus through a research project we have with some of our partners over at SUNY ESF. This chart provides some grouse productivity data. It shows the northern, western, and southeastern portions of the state. And this is all from 2018 through our 2024 seasons. And as you recall, this data is collected from our grouse parts collection effort. Productivity in the spring of 2024 seemed to be favorable, but data from the parts collection effort showed a different trend. And really the spring of 2025 was fairly wet, so grouse productivity is assumed to be fairly low. But I've heard from some hunters that have been out scouting that they've seen decent grouse numbers in northern New York, at least. So, spring weather can certainly impact grouse productivity to a certain extent, but it's by no means the only factor at play, like some people think. Grouse drumming rates per aggregate are shown in this map from the 2025 spring turkey hunting season. You can see a similar pattern to our hunting log data with higher numbers in northern New York and parts of southeastern New York and the East Appalachian Plateau aggregates. The graph on the right shows the statewide averages from 2007 to 2025, which is fairly stable. Some promising news regarding grouse management has come out of the Eastern Grouse Working Group. Biologists and non-government organization partners have worked together to develop a conservation plan for grouse management throughout the eastern United States. This plan really helps to highlight the priority for grouse management, some attainable goals for seeing more habitat management being done in New York and throughout the eastern United States. And this is something that is available for anyone to review online. Each year, the Fish and Wildlife Service puts out their population status for woodcock. This report is based off of two main data collection efforts. The first and kind of a larger scale one is a long-running singing ground survey project that spans all states and provinces where woodcock nest. And it's put on by staff and volunteers. They drive routes each spring when woodcock males are singing to attract mates. And this report is available online to the public and is published each summer. The second piece of information that factors into this report is collection and identification of hunter harvested woodcock wings that are submitted through the Fish and Wildlife Service. The report shows a gradual long-term decline in woodcock numbers throughout the majority of the range from the late 60s to present. This map shows statistically significant declines shown in gray and non-statistically significant declines in striped pattern. And really the only state that we see here that has not shown some sort of decline over that time period is Minnesota. Not all of Minnesota, since that is about the farthest west that woodcock will breed. But over the last 10 years, the results are a little bit more mixed. They still show a decline in New York State. From some of our hunting log data, the statewide woodcock flush rate last year was about 0.51 flushes per hour. That's a little bit below the long-term average of 0.59 birds flush per hour and below the 2023 flush rate of 0.69 flushes per hour. The highest woodcock flush rates occurred in St. Lawrence Valley, Central Hudson Valley, and Lake Plains ecoregion. And while flush rates are lowest in the coastal lowlands and the Appalachian Hills and Plateau ecoregions, so kind of the southern tier of the state. From 2010 to 2025, the flush rates has varied quite a bit by year, but it's been relatively stable over that 15-year period. The Fish and Wildlife Service's Harvest Information Program, or HIP program, that's the number that everyone gets when they're out to allow them to go out duck hunting or woodcock hunting or any of our migratory game birds. And it recorded in 2024, approximately 51 hunters in New York harvested approximately 4,700 woodcock and spent an estimated 22,100 days afield. One of the biggest research projects related to woodcock in recent time has been the Woodcock Migration Project. This encompasses 14 states and 3 provinces working together to capture and mark over 690 woodcock. throughout their breeding and wintering grounds. Over 38,000 woodcock GPS locations have been collected as of spring 2024. And this has really collected a wealth of data to allow us to better understand migration patterns, habitat usage, and productivity. The project has its own website where a wealth of research management information can be found. This includes publications that have come from the project and its partners. I think the coolest feature of the website though is that it has a migration data map, and this will show woodcock migration data over time. So it can really give you a better understanding of when woodcock are migrating, what areas they like to migrate through. And the hope is that the result of this project will provide more habitat management and really focus in on where management needs to be done, and that it'll benefit breeding and migratory woodcock throughout the range. Interesting note from this project shows that most woodcock that are from New York State typically start their migration during the first 2 weeks of November. A variety of habitat management work is conducted on lands managed by the DEC. The one notable one that a lot of folks have heard about is the Young Forest Initiative. That's a program that's headed up by our land management staff to create and restore young forests on wildlife management areas across the state. And this is something that should benefit grouse and woodcock population in those immediate areas. In addition, our Division of Lands and Forests, they're always hard at work conducting habitat management projects on our state forests throughout the state. And you can find more information about the Young Forest Initiative on that page on our website, or reach out to any of our land management staff and any of our local DEC offices. Wildlife management area specific information can also be found on our website, as we have a page for each WMA to provide for more information. And the same can be said for all of our state forests having their own specific pages. And I know that both our land management staff and our lands and forest staff are always enjoy talking with members of the public about habitat management, and especially in specific areas that they have interest in. For anyone interested in information on habitat management on private properties, there are several programs out there that can assist with developing and implementing management plans on your property. You can find information about all of these programs with a quick internet search, or reach out to your local DEC lands and forest staff. DEC also maintains a list of cooperating foresters that can assist with forest management implementation on your property. There's also a full list of our conservation easements on our website, and many of these are privately owned properties that conduct forest management, but they also allow public access for things like hunting. So those can be, some of the better places for finding grouse and woodcock, especially in Region 5 and 6. Information on DEC lands or conservation easements that are accessible to hunting and other activities can also be found on DEC's Info Locator program. This is an interactive map that shows DEC lands, other publicly accessible lands like conservation easements, wildlife management boundaries, trails, parking areas, and many other items of interest. There are even other base maps that you can choose from to show satellite imagery where grouse and woodcock hunting habitats can be more easily located. There's also plenty of private mapping applications out there that will help show you public and private land ownership, and these can be really helpful with finding good grouse and woodcock spots. Most of the information I discussed in this section is derived from these following 3 data sources. So they're very important in us to be able to effectively monitor our grouse and woodcock populations so that we can make sound management decisions. The grouse and woodcock hunting log is a brief entry that you fill out each time you return from a field, and provides invaluable data to us on grouse and woodcock numbers throughout the state. The more participants we have, the more accurate the data we can collect. and the better our harvest and population monitoring is. So, we will take all the participants that we can get with our grouse and woodcock hunting logs. And applicants can request by phone or email this log, and also provide some information a few slides later for how to sign up if you're interested. The grouse parts collection is another easy way that hunters can assist with data collection of harvested birds, and involves a collection of specific feathers that allow us to determine both the age and sex of the bird. This is really our best means of determining grouse productivity from the spring immediately following the hunting season. And this kind of closely aligns with our grouse and woodcock hunting log. It's kind of a packet that all gets sent together. Lastly, we've got our rough grouse drumming survey. This is for all you spring turkey hunters out there. This gives us a really good estimate of the occupancy of grouse throughout New York State, since the presence of grouse is pretty easily determined in the springtime when males are heard drumming to attract females to breed with. Over a longer period, this data can provide good insight as to if grouse populations in an area are trending up or down or are relatively stable. And like I mentioned, for anyone that wants to participate, whether that be you're a grouse hunter, you're a woodcock hunter, or you're a spring turkey hunter, please consider partaking in one or all of these efforts. I've provided both the links to our websites as well as QR codes that you can scan with your phone. I've also provided the third QR code down, and the third link down is our grouse harvest data dashboard. And this is something that helps us to provide members of the public with a wealth of data on our grouse harvest, grouse productivity, drumming rates. That's all available on that grouse harvest data dashboard. And you can look at specific parts of the state that you're interested in or that you might hunt or want to hunt in. And I'll leave this up for a short period of time so that folks can follow those links or scan the QR codes. And just a reminder, if anyone has any questions, feel free to put those in the Q&A and we'll make sure to get those answered. Thanks.
Okay. Step one, can folks hear me all right?
Yes, we can.
And then I apologize, I was having some audio issues, so I had to call in from my landline. So hopefully there isn't too much that, hopefully the connection's good and you guys can hear me all right. So yeah, so my name's Evan Wills. I'm a biologist based out at the DEC's Reynolds Game Farm located in Ithaca. And so I'm also the manager of the facility here, and at our location is where we produce all of the pheasants for release across the state for our hunting seasons and sponsored pheasant hunts and all that. And kind of personal notes, I consider myself, a jack of all, master of none when it comes to the outdoors. I do hunting, fishing, trapping, but with my main interests really in small game hunting and trapping. So my role here with the pheasant propagation program just really kind of ties well into my kind of personal interests. So I'm going to take the next few minutes and give you all just kind of a brief overview of the pheasant propagation program. There's been a lot of, I think, misconceptions about it over the years, and we've also been in kind of a period of heavy development. We experienced an avian influenza outbreak at our facility a couple of years back, and that took that led us to take kind of a really good hard look at our program and make sure that we're getting the most that we can out of it, and that also our hunters are getting the most they can. So Again, I'm just going to run through and give you kind of a brief history, where it's been, where it's going, and, you know, again, feel free to pop questions in there if anybody has them. I'll do my best to answer when I can. So, you know, I think the biggest thing with pheasants is, you know, you get a lot that, well, they are the Chinese ringneck pheasant. So they were first introduced from Asia in the late 1890s, but, you know, there's a lot of confusion, too, that sometimes assume that since they are not from America originally, that they are an invasive species, but that's certainly not the case. If they were an invasive, we wouldn't necessarily need the propagation program. So they were, as I said, first introduced in New York in the 1890s in eastern Long Island, and it was pretty soon after that there were some other releases that happened throughout the state, and they really took off in popularity as a game bird within the state, and, you know, just due to that incredible plumage on the males, very fast flight, so they made for kind of a fun sporting bird out there. And then, of course, obviously, they've got some very high-quality table fare. So, as this popularity kind of took off, so did their populations in the state. And so it was only about 20 years after that we had, oops, sorry, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. So populations kind of, you know, took well to New York's landscape, which at the time was comprised of minimal woodlands. That was due to a lot of the kind of deforestation throughout the state post-European settlement. The agriculture that was going on at the time was very favorable towards pheasants, a lot of small-scale ag with small grains. And then there was also some very heavily depressed predator populations. So kind of back through that time period, almost everything was considered vermin and eliminated off the landscape. But so about 20 years after their first introduction, we were able to kind of have the first declared season by our conservation department. And so even at that time when populations were strong enough that they said, hey, we're going to have a season on this, it was only a year after that they initiated the first state-owned propagation facility, which was in Sherburne, New York. And that facility is still there, but it operates as kind of it's the Rogers Environmental Ed Center, and then there's also a DEC field office located there as well. And so again, throughout a lot of the 20th century, when we had these strong populations, there's still a lot of propagation that was still going on. So the state had as many as 7 different game farms throughout the state: Long Island, Brownville, Western New York, out by Batham. That was the John White Game Farm. And then in 1927 was the Reynolds Game Farm, which is still in production today. So. Now, all this while, you can even look back on past annual conservation reports, and it was still quite often noted that, you know, stocking was kind of done to help out some of those populations, but again, even during those times of high wild birds, it was still quoted as for the gun. And so, you know, one of the biggest misconceptions with the propagation program is that birds are going out there and released for the reestablishment of wild populations. And so even as far back as, you know, mid and early 20th century, it was still being done to just have supplemental game on the landscape for harvest in the fall and for opportunity. And then we saw through the, you know, populations peaked once they hit into the late 60s, and there was a lot that kind of went on that made things really good for pheasants, and then things started to kind of turn and became a little bit less favorable for them. So they started to lose a lot of habitat through suburban sprawl, shifts in agriculture. Kind of post-World War II is when we start to see some things in that kind of change. And habitat, again, you're going to hear me mention that a lot. Habitat is just such a driving factor for birds and a lot of other species. And so some of the big things that benefit pheasants are some different like ag programs that work to preserve habitat. And so back through the 50s, 60s, early 70s, there was this crop diversion and soil bank program, kind of an early predecessor to our modern day CRP, Conservation Reserve Program. And so that really did away with a lot of this kind of reserve land that was held and benefiting grassland species. So, and then again, once habitat becomes less than ideal, then we're going to see an increase in predation because those birds are no longer a proverbial needle in a haystack. But it was in late 1970s that the state, had their first pheasant management plan, and within that, it was even addressed at that point that, hey, despite all these efforts, the writing's on the wall. Stocking isn't necessarily going to play a major role in reestablishing populations, and so in that original plan back in 1979, it was even stated that stocking efforts were going to be for put and take management. And over the years, a lot of different efforts were tried to get that resurgence in the wild birds that were out there in New York. Through the early 2000s, we had the Landowner Incentive Program, and that was a program designed to incentivize landowners to leave some habitat that would benefit pheasants and other grassland species. And unfortunately, when it comes to land use, a lot of times money talks if there's more value in selling that in a private market, or if crops are in higher demand that year. And so these two graphs here, I think, also really highlight some important factors behind New York's wild pheasant population, or I guess kind of lack thereof in modern times. So on the left, we've got the CRP enrollment last year. And so you can kind of see by all those green dots and the concentration of green dots, landowners that are enrolled in that CRP program that, again, is set up to preserve habitat, create buffer zones, and avoid kind of just big stripped out usage of the land. In areas where we have that highest participation, that's where we always have our strong pheasant numbers. So, we look out to the Midwest, to the Dakotas and all that. And CRP participation, unfortunately, just isn't really that strong in New York. There's a couple different driving factors to that. But, and then again, coupled with the fact that, again, I said at the earlier stages of wild populations, there was a lot of kind of deforested area. And so as New York State kind of reverts back to that forested state, we see a, kind of decrease in those species such as pheasant and, perhaps some of our young forest species, and that's what has, really spurred some of that young forest initiative. And so again, that kind of increase in timbered land isn't going to bode well for pheasants, but again, as I said, pheasant propagation has always kind of been there as kind of a backbone of pheasant hunting and pheasant harvest, and recent surveys have us at about 25 to 30,000 pheasant hunters across the state. And, we do get sightings of birds outside of like our pheasant season, and if you go on to sites like eBird, there will be sightings of pheasants, but a lot of those really just end up being holdover from prior stockings, and there are certainly very isolated reports of, pheasants that maybe even do have a chance to reproduce, but it's not on that kind of grand scale that we might like to see. So we had most recently done a survey with pheasant hunters and just kind of looking at some of their information in regards to how they were satisfied with the program, what they would like to see. And so with that, we were also looking at both our active pheasant hunters and lapsed pheasant hunters, so folks that had never had or hadn't in a while. And so one kind of interesting piece of information out of that was that we had 62% of all surveyed hunters had or do currently pheasant hunt. So that is kind of a pretty important rate of hunters out there that, either had or do participate in pheasant hunting. So with that, as I said, we wanted to kind of take a look at this program and give it a little bit more strategy and a little bit more purpose than in the past where, hey, we were just raising X amount of birds, tossing them out on the landscape on these hunting sites, and that was about where the management of the stocked pheasants ended. And there's been, a lot of interest in developing and learning more about R3 efforts and bettering R3 efforts. And R3 is just a shorthand term for the recruitment of of new hunters, the retention of those hunters that we currently have, how do we keep them engaged, and the reactivation of lapsed hunters. So we want to, again, take kind of a look back at our program, a self-look, and see how can we better tailor what we're doing to address these three groups of outdoors folks. So when it comes to our new hunters, we want them to go from that stage of interest to then becoming that vested hunter, and being able to go out hunt independently on their own. And there's quite a few barriers for those new folks. A lot of our hunters, there was one study that I saw that was like 37% of new interested hunters that take a hunter education course, they end up not even becoming established hunters. And so we want to kind of identify what that break is that prevents them from going to the next step. And so a lot of the reasoning behind that is a lack of property for them to access. They don't know where to hunt. They feel like they don't have a place to hunt. A lot of them don't have the social support. So us that were perhaps raised in a hunting family, you kind of take that for granted that you just kind of grew up knowing how to hunt and get out there. And then, again, without that kind of social support to guide them and teach them, it also results in a lack of confidence that they can go out there and hunt on their own. So a lot of our new hunters, they want to hunt, but they take the course. They didn't, okay, it teaches you the basics, but they're looking for a little bit more of that hands-on opportunity. And so with pheasant stocking, we can kind of use this and our propagation program to really kind of target some of those barriers. And so all of our release sites that we're putting birds out on each fall is, a public access site, and the main purpose is to get people out there, get them engaged in the outdoors, get them to enjoy hunting, and become an established hunter. And so we can take a look at our release sites, and again, historically, it was just kind of like, hey, we got whatever sites we could, but now we can look at our, density of hunter densities in relation to population centers, and kind of use that to look through and identify gaps and see, hey, maybe we need to put a little bit more focus and find a site over here. So another program that we offer is the sponsored pheasant hunt program, and this is one that we, really want to promote and make sure that as many folks are aware of it, that can participate, that want to assist with it. And with this program, we have volunteers all around the state that hold these publicly accessible, no-charge hunts that are kind of geared towards our new and underrepresented hunters. And so we provide the pheasants to them based on number of registrants, and they put an application through us to make sure that hunt is, kind of shooting for that correct message that we're aiming to spread. And so again, these events are really kind of that really awesome next step from that hunter education course where, okay, you're getting the basics, you're getting that says, hey, you're now legally allowed to hunt. All right, but then these sponsored pheasant hunts give a chance for these experienced hunters to take folks out and kind of show them that next phase in firearm handling and just kind of hunter, ethics in the field. And, it's a great way to kind of bridge from that one step to the other. And they've been highly successful, and we've really gotten some positive reviews on it. So we're really looking to continue that, expand that. In that map here, that's of hunts that happened last year. We had over 50 hunts across the state, took place in 24 different counties. And again, we're looking to increase that as much as we can. And so anybody that's listening or that knows anybody that, thinks could be of a benefit to attend one of these hunts, I've got the QR code there, as well as the website that they're listed at. And alternatively, too, if you're a seasoned hunter and you think it's important to kind of get that next generation or that next phase of hunters out there, and you want to hold one of these sponsored pheasant hunts, we've got the webpage there where you can get an application, or you can always reach out with any questions on what quite is entailed in holding a sponsored hunt. We always work with folks and with new hunt coordinators to kind of work them through the steps in the process and what it might look like. And so all these hunts are posted on our Hunt Fish NY event page, which is at register-ed.com, and that webpage will show up in just a second. And so this page is something that was launched last year that goes beyond the sponsored pheasant hunt program and really provides an opportunity for people to get on and find out what's happening, what they can get involved in relation to hunting and fishing in the outdoors. And so last year we had over 76 events that, mentored hunts for different species, not just pheasants. So, turkey, goose, whitetail, introductory classes, people, again, looking to learn that next step in their hunter education, and some festivals and outreach events. And so this has been very popular, and it's a great resource that we want to just make sure that we continue to promote and get out there so that people are informed and at least know where to go if they do want to look for these opportunities. And so this is what the page looks like here. And so again, it's just www.register-ed.com, and then that'll take you to the landing page. Or again, that QR code that I had up a couple slides ago as well will get you there. So a lot of that's for our new hunters, but we also want to make sure that we are retaining those current hunters that we have and make sure that they're continuing to have a positive experience when they go out pheasant hunting, and that they're going to continue to be established hunters. And so the best way to kind of find out information with that is through surveying. And again, it comes down to folks responding to surveys and providing us the data and insight that we need, whether it's on pheasant hunting satisfaction or, again, kind of those rare samples of, trail cam surveys, fur bearer sightings, all that. It's just great opportunities for citizen science and for folks out there for their voices to be heard. So what was important to current hunters was really that they wanted to be sure that they wanted to feel like there was going to be a chance of success. And so they wanted a chance to hear and see pheasants. And besides that, important factors to them were site availability, that they had a spot to go pheasant hunting that they felt was going to have pheasants and have a chance. And so with that, they also felt that, more pheasants released then obviously would probably result in an increase in that satisfaction. So we've increased our annual allocation of released birds to up over 40,000 pheasants a year, where we were at about 30,000, and additional stockings. So historically, stockings were done the first few weeks of the season, and then that was about it. But last year, we implemented the first of some late season stockings that were met with huge success. People seem to really enjoy them, so the plan is to continue those and even grow upon it where we can. As I said, getting more birds out on the landscape. So we have between our annual fall release of adult pheasants of about 40,000, 42,000. We then also have 10,000 birds that are put out on the landscape through the day-old chick program. So that's a program where people can receive day-old chicks free of charge from us, and they're going to raise them to at least 12 weeks of age and then release them out on public hunting grounds as well. So again, we distributed about 10,000 chicks for that purpose. And then site availability, we've got over 100 sites all across the state. We've got a new interactive mapper that is on there. And the interactive mapper is really a great source to find out, hey, right where birds are. We give a range of when they're going out, and also a quantity, because a lot of concern from folks is, hey, our bird's going to get put out here, and that gives us provides them with the information to know. And so then lastly, so we've looked at recruiting new hunters, retaining the current ones, and then what does it take to get some of those lapsed hunters in, and why did they drop out in the first place? And so historically, with this survey, reasons for that was they felt they just had a poor chance of success, and on top of some crowding, poor site quality, not knowing where to hunt, having to travel too long to hunt. So the ways that we're going to look into that and are planning on addressing that is we've had some regions that are starting to address some of the crowding issues by closing on stocking days. And we've, again, just going back to that whole assessment of stocking sites, we want to keep the ones that we are finding the best quality, and maybe one before, hey, if it was rather small and not really overall valuable, that one might not be worth retaining. And again, that development of the interactive mapper, as we know, these lapsed hunters didn't know where to hunt. And so that interactive mapper is just getting the information out there to folks so that they know where to go and what to expect. So, through all this, what does the future of the pheasant propagation program look like? And, I think it's safe to say that, we're on the cusp of our new pheasant management plan and really kind of getting all that we can out of our pheasant propagation program. Like I said, it's kind of that turn of just the old methodology of just putting birds out, dropping them on the landscape, and calling it quits there. But really kind of creating and focusing on a purposeful use of this propagation program, getting the most value out of it, the most rewards for the inputs in terms of making sure that folks are continuing to, be upland game bird hunters, small game hunters, and even just getting them out in the field and out into the woods. So with that, if anybody on here is a current pheasant hunter, good luck this season. We're right around the corner from it. If anybody out there is thinking about becoming a pheasant hunter or wants to give it a try, go check out that webpage with the hunts listed. See if there's one in your area. There most likely is. And see what it's all about. And again, if you're a lapsed hunter, hey, we've made changes to the program. We're going to continue to better the program. So if you haven't in a while, pick it up again and head out there. So I thank you all for taking the time to sit with me and listen tonight. And again, if any questions pop up, I'm more than happy to answer.
All right, hopefully folks can hear me. Can someone just confirm that that you can hear me right now?
Yep, we can hear you, Mike.
Awesome. And I have control, it looks like. Yeah, it's not working for me either if I do the... Okay, well, all right, this will work. I'll use the top. All right, so thanks for joining us, everyone. My name is Mike Muthersbaugh. Again, I'm a wildlife biologist focused on upland game birds out of the central office, Albany office in New York. And I'm just going to talk about the wild turkey in New York, what we do for some monitoring of the population, talk about harvest data and how we get it, productivity trends of wild turkey in New York, future directions, just touch on spring season considerations and that spring turkey hunter survey, satisfaction survey that we sent out earlier this year that Josh mentioned back in the beginning of the talk. Again, if you have questions, feel free to throw them in the Q&A. You can just send it to everyone in the Q&A. Just type it out there, and I will try to make up some ground because we're running a little behind. So I don't want to keep you here all evening, but so I'll try to talk quickly, but feel free to ask questions if you need clarification. So the DEC collects two main data types for turkey. We have harvest data, importantly, which I'll get into first, and then I'll touch on summer survey productivity. So how we get that. So turkey harvest estimation, we calculate the harvest of turkeys each season, so fall and spring season. After each season, we calculate that using postseason surveys. So from these surveys, we get hunting effort and take per unit effort, importantly. Historically, we used to send these surveys out by mail. It was just a turkey card survey. Some of you on this might have gotten one of those postcards up until a few years ago. And then we transitioned completely over to an online or email survey. And so, like I said, we're still calculating the same things from that postseason survey. Eventually, we get our estimated harvest. We get that by calculating hunting effort based on the survey responses, and eventually take per unit effort. So how many turkeys are taken per hour hunted, for example, or per 100 hunter days is what we'll commonly use. So like I said, those are right now, those are postseason email campaigns, and that's how we distribute those. We're sending it to 50,000 email turkey tag holders. Over 40,000 of those end up being delivered and not bouncing. So far, we've gotten about 10,000 returns each time we send it for about a 20% response rate, a little over that, which is pretty good for email surveys. So if you get those, keep filling them out, whether you hunted or not. And then if you hunted and you still didn't take a bird and you just got unlucky that season, that's still really great data that we can definitely use, and we need you to participate in that, because the more survey respondents we have, the tighter we can go on our spatial scale in terms of analysis, and the more data we have on turkeys, and the better we're able to monitor the population and figure out what's going on, keep a pulse on that population. All right, so here is the harvest trend from 1998 through 2025. So that's just the spring season estimated harvest from 1998 through 2025. You can see that there was peaks in the late 90s, early 2000s, and again in 2006 through 9 or so. But after that time, we saw a pretty substantial decline in estimated harvest. But I'll mention that after about 2015, 2016, we kind of saw a stabilization of the estimated spring harvest. And this is actually a very similar curve, but this is different. This is the number of turkey hunters that we estimate using those postseason surveys. Again, the same time period. This is from 1998 through 2025, and this is number of hunters. So you can see that there's been a pretty darn similar trend over that same time period in our spring turkey hunter numbers. We see that curve going down, and if you overlay them right on top of each other, we can see that the top graph here is the estimated spring harvest, the bottom graph is the estimated spring hunter numbers, and just look how uncanny those trend lines kind of follow each other. So if we used estimated spring harvest just to try to monitor the population and use that as an index of the turkey population in New York, would not be very accurate, because we know that hunter numbers have come down. So that is likely a driving factor. So what we know is that harvest is definitely tied to hunting effort for turkeys. And this is true of a lot of species. And this is why just your plain straight up estimated harvest for game species is usually not the perfect estimate, or not the perfect index of the population that we would hope it would be. And like I mentioned, if you look at our spring estimated harvest over the last few years, it's been relatively stable. There might have been a little bit of a dip here, but pretty darn stable compared to that real big drop that we saw from about 2010 through 2015 or so. So this one, let me just back up here. That graph was just showing the trend line from 2017 through 2025, so up until this spring. So pretty darn stable harvest and relatively stable hunter numbers. You can see that the trend line might still be angling down a little bit. So this is over that same time period, 2017 through 2025. This is hunter numbers for the spring season. Again, trending down slightly, but and that tracks with the estimated harvest a little bit too. Take per unit effort. So I mentioned that estimated harvest alone is probably not the best index to look at for your turkey population, and which is why we often look at spring turkey harvest per 100 hunter days, or take per unit effort. So this is just one of those metrics that we can look at to help keep a beat on the help keep track of the turkey population. So this is 2017 through 2025. This is take per 100 hunter days in the spring season. And I'll just caveat this because the last 2 years, 2024 and 2025, again, we get all this data that's used to make these figures and graphs from those postseason surveys, and those last 2 years, 2024 and 25, were used the email surveys data exclusively. So kind of a maybe the shift higher of the take per unit effort might have been from a relic of changing the survey type between years. So, but generally speaking, also relatively stable in New York. It seems like over the last 9 years or so, last decade, we've seen a pretty stable turkey population. And now, again, I'm just talking about the turkey population statewide. I haven't gotten into anything on local levels or anything like that. But statewide, I think if we, let's see, if we look at the dashboard here, we can get into localities and more regional effects a little bit. So let's see if this works for me. So you can go and see these. These are on our website. If you just Google Turkey Dashboard New York, Spring Turkey Dashboard New York, you can find the spring one. There's also a fall one, which I probably won't have time to show you today, but definitely check it out. If you just Google New York DEC Spring Turkey Dashboard or Spring Turkey Dashboard DEC, something like that, you'll come up with this where you can look at those trend lines that I was just showing. And I should be updating this after each season once we get that estimated harvest in. And you can look at harvest per square mile, so you can look at where we take the most birds per square mile of land, estimated harvest, just generally speaking, how many birds are taken in each unit. And if you click on these units, let's go back to the take per unit effort. If you click on these units, let's see, right here, I'm in this aggregate. This is called a WMU aggregate. I'm in this one, and you can look at that trend line will update, so you can see how take per unit effort has changed, has trended through time since 2017. So check that out if you're interested in looking it up or want to share that with other folks. And then you can also look at our harvest timing on this one. You can see that we harvest on this graph. This is showing proportion of birds taken by date in our spring season. Currently, our spring season is May 1 through 31. Every year, it's been that way for a really long time now, about 30 years or more. And we harvest most of our birds in the first 3 to 5 days of the season. You can see on May 1, we take about 14% of all the turkeys that we're going to take that year. So, yep, early season is definitely when we take most of our birds. Just something interesting to note. So yeah, check out that dashboard if you're interested in looking at that more, and where you can click on your specific WMU aggregate where you live or hunt. I'm going to stop sharing that. Hopefully I go right back to here. And yeah, so check that out. You can look at that data in more detail, and I should be updating that as years go on. And so yeah, next I wanted to talk about summer sighting survey and what we get from that, which is turkey productivity estimate, which the main one being poults per hen. So that's the number of poults you can expect to see per hen in August. So we run this summer wild turkey sighting survey where we collect all sightings of turkeys during the month of August, not just hens and poults, toms too, but the really important metric we get from that is poults per hen. We had a really nice and high ratio in 2024, and I'll show you that in a minute, of the estimated poults per hen, and it's our proxy of how productive was the turkey population that year. Last year was favorable conditions in the spring. This year was not quite as great as many of you might remember. It rained every stinking weekend from February through I think till June, it seemed like. So a lot more rain in the southern half of the state, but the northern half of the state was actually pretty dry over the same time period this spring. So we still had a decent recruitment year this year for turkeys, it looks like. So, but the main thing I wanted to point out is, again, over through time, yeah, we have some variability between years. Most of what drives productivity variation between years is the weather. We all know that. A really cold, wet spring is not so great for nesting hens, and especially those young poults. If they're just hatching, they're probably going to get hammered by a really cold. They can't thermoregulate as well as the adults, so they're going to get hammered, and we will have a lower poults per hen estimate usually when that happens, when we have a cold, wet spring. So So that's just through time since 2005, but again, generally pretty stable despite some variation in between years. That data, the summer productivity data, you can also look at that same trend line and your specific WMU aggregate that you're interested in. You can click on in the fall turkey harvest dashboard. I'm not going to get into that now because we're running behind, but yeah, feel free to check that one out too. Again, you can find them pretty easily on our website, especially if you just Google New York State turkey dashboards. You should be able to find them. So again, if you take those two data sources together, our harvest estimation, take per unit effort, and you take our productivity data, if you take those together, we have a pretty stable population of turkeys statewide, especially over the last decade or so. Now, again, regionally, things might be different, and especially on local scales, things might be different. Turkey flocks ebb and flow to a much larger degree on smaller spatial scales, but statewide, turkeys are pretty stable. I don't want to jinx us or anything like that, but I would say we have stopped that major decline from 2010 to 2015 or so in the population that got folks really worried about the population. But last thing I want to talk about, with that stable turkey population in mind that we think we have statewide, we have not changed, and I mentioned this earlier, we have not really changed the spring season structure in New York for over 30 years. I'm not saying it needs changed, but we just wanted to revisit the spring season structure in New York and to see if it was satisfying New York turkey hunters. And so what we did was we collaborated with Cornell, Center for Conservation Sciences, so CCSS, and we sent out a survey of spring turkey tag holders, so spring turkey hunters. Earlier this year, we used over 10,000 permit holders from 2024, so known turkey hunters. We split this survey up into 3 geographic strata, and I'll get into that in a minute. It was a mixed mode survey, so we had paper and we had some online, and overall we had a response rate for this survey of just over 20%, I think it was, and over 1,500 active turkey hunters replied to this, and non-respondent interviews, Cornell did these in June of 2025. They got 198 non-respondent interviews done, and 138 of those were active turkey hunters. So from those data, we were able to capture a few really interesting things, and I just wanted to touch on those now. So there's those 3 management zones, those that we split this survey up into, just in case, satisfaction and beliefs about the turkey population and drivers of satisfaction of spring turkey hunters are different between Western New York, Southeastern New York, and Northern New York. So for this, we're not looking at Long Island populations. They're their own beast, partly because that's a really new spring season. So we're kind of just letting that settle in, letting that go for a little while to see what happens with that. And it's been really great so far, that season down there. But when we asked the turkey hunters on this survey in New York, how has the turkey population changed in the last 5 years? What was their perception of that? Well, we saw that in the Southeast and West, a large portion of those turkey hunters believed that the turkey population decreased. A good portion thought that it stayed the same as well, at least in their locality, but not many thought it increased. But interestingly, in the north, we saw that the turkey hunters up there thought that the population either increased or stayed the same predominantly. A good handful thought it decreased as well, but definitely a dichotomy between the southern zone of New York and the northern zone of New York. And it's interesting to note that the eBird data, so this is eBird Status and Trends tool. You can look this up. It's publicly available. This is a publication using data from 2012 through 2022, where they looked at eBird records and they determined whether a population was increasing, decreasing, or they were not sure whether it was increasing or decreasing, or probably staying the same. So this is, again, data from 2012 through 2022, and you'll notice New York here. You can see that in the southern tier and down in region 3, closer to the island, closer to New Jersey, we saw some declining pockets of wild turkey, whereas the St. Lawrence Valley and up through the Champlain Valley, we actually saw increasing turkey populations, which really perfectly jives with what we saw from the perceptions of turkey hunters on that survey we sent out earlier this year. So just really cool, interesting stuff there. And you'll also notice from looking at this graphic that below New York, south of New York, everything's pretty much declining. And then everything north of New York is pretty much increasing in turkeys. So it seems like New York is really the inflection point of turkey populations. If you know anything about the turkey populations nationwide, the Southeast is in kind of rough shape right now, with most of those states down there, south of New York, even Pennsylvania and south. Those turkey populations are continuing to decline for not really known reasons overall, at least. When we asked turkey hunters what factors do they think turkey hunters, what factors do they think are driving this population decline, that they said that most turkey hunters in the southern zone thought that turkey populations had declined in the last 5 years. Well, what was driving that? What do they think was driving that? And so if we look at what they perceived was moderate to a great effect on turkeys, predation was number one. Local weather conditions impacted them as well, habitat loss, and changes in farming practices. And it's probably a combination of all those things, right? So if a local turkey population is changing, probably a combination of those things. You might even throw disease into that mix as well, especially for small flocks. So how I mentioned that the turkey hunter numbers, so this is turkey hunter numbers again. This is the same graphic I showed earlier, but that turkey hunter numbers went down over the last 30 years or so. Well, when we asked how those same turkey hunters in that survey, how will hunting participation change over the next 5 years, many thought that there would be fewer hunter numbers due to low turkey numbers, especially in the southeast and west. And in the southeast and west, they also thought, a large portion of them thought that current hunter numbers would quit due to low turkey hunter numbers. So due to low turkey numbers. So we think that if things hold true, if the perceptions hold true, we may see more declines in turkey hunter numbers, which would be a real shame, and I hope that's not the case, and I hope that the turkey population is not declining just like those same turkey hunters believed. So, and I don't believe that is the case at the moment. So when we asked satisfaction questions, this is the really interesting stuff, and we kind of expected this, at least some of us here, when we asked the questions, what is driving your spring turkey hunting satisfaction? So what makes you get up in the morning at 3:30 to get to your spot and beat the bushes and get out there? How often I hear gobbling was by and large across all zones, management zones that we looked at, that was the main driver of satisfaction for turkey hunters. So you really want to hear gobbles. You may not have a chance at that bird, but if you hear gobbles, you had a pretty decent day. That's what it tells me. Now, again, it was definitely the highest rated, and this is a different way to look at this. This is when after the Cornell did some weighting on those numbers, but again, closer to 1 means so the lower the number is, the higher it ranked in terms of importance of a driver of satisfaction, and the higher, closer to 5, would be lowest. So amount of contact with other hunters, hunting pressure, in other words, doesn't really turn people off. Doesn't turn turkey hunters off to hunting, but hearing gobbling is paramount. So they really want to hear gobbles, and I can definitely relate to that. That makes a good day. But again, number of bearded turkeys available on the landscape for harvest, so that's your population pretty much, was still important. And opportunity to be in the field was also important. And these switched around a little bit based on whatever zone we were in, but generally speaking, it was pretty similar between the different management zones. And then my level of harvest success was also relatively important. But again, how much gobbling is happening on the landscape drives hunter satisfaction in New York, somewhat unsurprisingly. Where do we go from here? Well, we're starting this structured decision-making process where we're going to use some of that data from the turkey survey, from the spring hunter turkey survey, and we're going to evaluate the spring turkey season structure. We want to determine if modifications would better satisfy turkey hunters while still maintaining a sustainable turkey population. So that's important. We want to keep the turkey population sustainable and for future generations of spring turkey hunters. But we want to see if we can adjust it in any way, or maybe not. Whatever we need to do to satisfy turkey hunters while maintaining that sustainable turkey population. Future research. I definitely want to get some future research going, and we're in the process of trying to get some projects going. We really need to obtain updated vital rates for wild turkeys in New York. It's been going on 15 years now for some of these data. So we need things like male harvest rate. So how many male birds are we removing? What percentage of the male bird population are we removing every spring? That's a really important vital rate that we need to get updated metrics on. We also really need to know what are their hen survival these days. How many hens are surviving through the spring? What's their nesting rate like? What's their nest success rate? What's their nest success look like in today's landscape with changing agricultural practices, changing predator communities, all that, changing hunting tactics, you name it. So we really need some updated vital rates, and I'm looking forward to getting some research going on wild turkeys again. And we'll continue to gather harvest and productivity data. So we're going to keep sending those postseason harvest surveys. 50,000 will be sent to valid emails, or we hope valid emails. 50,000 will be sent up via email post-fall and post-spring turkey seasons. And again, that summer sighting survey will still be going on. So if you get those surveys in your inbox or in your junk mail, hopefully not, please fill it out. Again, even if you didn't hunt, that's still important data. And if you did hunt and didn't shoot a bird, that is also still critical data to help us characterize what hunting effort looked like each spring and each fall. And if you see birds in the month of August, definitely fill that out. And that one's pretty easy to find during the month of August. You just Google New York summer turkey sighting survey. And with that, I think hopefully I got through that relatively quickly. And now it's your turn. So yeah, again, it looks like please use the Q&A function, and we'll respond both verbally and through the Q&A chat if you have anything.
All right. Well, give you guys a couple minutes. If anyone has any remaining questions, we really appreciate everyone tuning in and appreciate all of the speakers' time to put together these awesome presentations on all the great work we're doing. And yeah, we really appreciate you all tuning in and for answering our surveys and helping us out with all these citizen science projects. It's what makes us successful and able to manage the diverse wildlife we have in New York State. All right, well, not seeing any questions, I guess we'll call it here. Feel free to reach out to us if you have questions and in the future. And we will be sending out a link if you have others who might be interested in seeing some of these presentations or learning more about things we're doing with small game management in New York. And we will try to spread the word on this and get this out there as good as we can. If you have any feedback for us, also feel free to send us an email there at wildlife@DEC. These are new to us. We haven't done these webinars in the past. We had a lot of folks sign up, not quite as many attend as we were hoping for this webinar, but that really nice days, it makes it hard to sit in front of a computer. But really, if we missed the mark, if we hit the mark, any feedback you can give us would be really appreciated. we have a question, but I don't see the question. Mike, I'll have you answer this one.
Which one?
So,
I'm struggling to keep up here with the.
yeah. So, do the decline in number of turkeys, especially in western counties, or with the decline, has there been any talk of reducing take to one gobbler or eliminating the fall season?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for the question. So yeah, that's one of the reasons we're going through this spring season structured decision-making process. So that's one of the reasons that we surveyed the spring turkey hunters through that survey with Cornell. So we're just testing whether, we first needed to get at the perception of that decline. And so again, yes, spring turkey hunters in Western New York believe that the turkey population had trended down over the last 5 years and probably beyond. And so, yes, the perception is that the turkey population declined, and then there is talk. So when we go through that structured decision-making process, we will consider what satisfies turkey hunters and take into account the turkey population. And that is probably one alternative that will be considered is dropping the spring season bag limits. That's one idea. Eliminating the fall season is another thing. That's a whole separate structured decision-making process. We intend to revisit that, especially when we get updated data. Hopefully with that future research that I was talking about, we can get updated data and that'll better inform our management decisions with regards to season dates, bag limits, things like that.
All right. Thanks for that, Mike. And thank you to all the other speakers. And thank you all for attending.
We got one more.
Nope, one more. That is a great question. The question is, the importance of habitat comes up continually for species in these presentations and really in almost every presentation we give about any species. And so their question for Matthew is, how is the state working to initiate habitat work beyond and including young forests? So we have a whole group of biologists and foresters and land managers that are dedicated to our young forest management and land management of wildlife management areas. I think one of the greatest challenges we have is that we own a very small amount of land, comparatively speaking, to the landscape in New York. And so our fingerprint on available habitat for all these species is pretty minor when you compare it to all the private land that we have a much more difficult time affecting. Tim touched on it in his presentation. There's a number of funding sources, some state, some federal, that are available to landowners. And if there are questions, that's something that I definitely encourage folks to reach out to their local DEC wildlife office and ask questions about, what they may qualify for. And we have foresters, we have biologists that specialize in land management who may be able to put you in touch with the right people at maybe NRCS. It may be some other federal agency that administers these programs and can help find funding for the projects, or in some cases there's tax breaks with that 480A program. So there's a lot of opportunities for landowners who want to manage their land specifically for wildlife or for forest health, because there's a lot of different objectives on what people may want to manage their lands for. With the grouse stuff too, we didn't mention it a lot. I mean, we're trying to come up with some prioritization tools that helps people who say want to put grouse habitat on their property, to help them identify where are good properties to put grouse habitat, because you could put grouse habitat in a place that doesn't have grouse or a place that is a high disease risk, And that's not really a good use of your resources, because if grouse can't survive there because of habitat, because of disease, or they're just too far away to recolonize the area, then it's not really an effective use. And maybe in that place it's a better idea to manage for woodcock. The reality is, when you put diverse habitat on the ground, it's going to benefit a multitude of species, both game and non-game. And obviously on our lands, we're trying to affect both game and non-game species. So hopefully that answers your question. All right. I think that's the real last question this time. So thank you again for everybody for attending, and hope you have a great night.